I just want to say that most of the advice I'm going to give today is primarily targeted towards English language AQA. However, some of the advice I give in today's video may be relevant to the other exam boards as well, but just bear that in mind. I also want to quickly say before we get into the video that I'm offering 40-minute one-on-one sessions over the half term where you can go through with me any topic, any subject, any exam board that you're struggling with, any questions you have, and I can overall help you build your exam confidence for just £10. If you're interested, all you have to do is email me on this email right here. Okay, let's get into the video. So with English language AQA, you have 5 questions. How I'd recommend you do it is do the paper back to front. So start with question 5, because obviously question 5 is worth half the marks of the paper. So you don't want to run out of time for question 5. You're far better off running out of time for something like question 1. And also, even if you don't run out of time, you don't want to be rushing question 5 either. You want to be taking as much time as you need to, around the 50-minute mark, so you can maximize the marks you get in that question. And then after question 5, then go to question 4, then 3, then 2, then 1. You get the point. I'd also recommend skim reading through the extract in the beginning before you do question 5 as well, just so you can familiarize yourself with it. And then obviously as you go through the questions in section A, you can read it in more detail depending on what they're asking you. So now let's go into my individual advice for each question. So first of all, we have question 1. What I'd recommend you do is with each sentence, start the sentence with the subject of the question that they give you. If the question is list 4 things said about Thomas in this extract, in these lines, then you would say Thomas went to the park, Thomas had red hair, Thomas was told by the man that he blah 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 blah. You get the point. By starting with the subject, you ensure you don't deviate from the question, and that way you ensure you get maximum marks. It's 4 marks, so you'd spend around 5 minutes on it, so a minute for each sentence basically. Next, question 2, my advice for that is you need to plan it out in the beginning for just a couple of minutes, because your response needs to be conceptualized. What I mean by conceptualized is having an idea that kind of runs through the entire response rather than having loads of different scattered ideas. And if you're just writing it spontaneously, you're going to end up with loads of scattered ideas. So you want to have a conceptual idea from the start. The only way to really do that is to plan it out. Just get some quotes, annotate them, make a point, put the points together to form the conceptual idea at the beginning, and just write your response from there, with each point linking back to the original concept at the beginning. But don't spend more than a couple of minutes planning it, because you don't want to spend too long doing that. You'll run out of time. The structure that I recommend for question 2 is PETAL, so point, evidence, technique, analysis, link. Your evidence, your quotes need to be embedded into your writing, and analysis is the bulk of your response and should be layered. But what I mean by layered is having each point linking to the next and developing one another. It's 8 marks, so we spend around 10 minutes on it. Next, we have paper 1, question 3. Question 3 is very similar to question 2. They're like twins, but the difference is question 2 is focusing on language and question 3 is focusing on structure. I still recommend using PETAL for this one, so point, evidence, technique, analysis, link, but obviously with the technique, you use structural terminology instead of language terminology. Structural terminology can include things like flashbacks, foreshadowing, circular narratives, changes in tension, changes in mood, perspective, use of dialogue, etc. You'd still try and plan it out in the beginning, because you again want to have a conceptualized response throughout. When you're analysing, you have to think about the significance of the structural technique that's been used. It's not sufficient to just sit there and name as many techniques as you can. You have to say, for example, if there is a flashback, you can say the use of the flashback causes a digression from the narrative, which brings the reader out of the narrative and causes heightened tension, because we want to get back to the story, we want to know what's happening next. It makes us impatient to return. And of course, at the end, you link it back to the beginning, link it to your original points to have a layered response. Paper 1, question 4, so you'd be given a statement and asked to what extent do you agree or disagree with that statement. How I'd recommend you word it is so that you partially agree, so that you can argue for and against the statement, because normally within the statement you have 2 parts to it, and you'd probably agree with one part and disagree with the other part, so that's how you'd write it. Then you'd have 4 petal paragraphs, 2 that are for the statement and 2 against the statement. With question 4, you would evaluate ideas for the statement and then use methods to back it up. Methods would be things like structural techniques, language techniques, any use of dialogue, paragraph forms, sentence forms, structural devices, all of those kind of things. And planning is absolutely essential with this question. What I'd recommend you do also is write a thesis at the beginning. A thesis can be written by just combining all of your points in like a summary sentence and then putting it at the beginning. Kind of like a conclusion, but at the beginning. And then every time you write a new point, just link it back to your thesis. The question is 20 marks. I'd recommend spending 25 minutes on it. Lastly, we have question 5. Now, there are 2 parts to question 5. You can either write a story or you can do a description. I personally recommend doing a description, but if you choose to do the story as well, that's fine, as long as you can use appropriate techniques, and I'm going to show you in a minute. But let's start with the description. So with the description, this is the structure that I'd recommend following. So you have above, drop in, shift, zoom in, zoom out, leave. So above, focus on the weather, focus on the general atmosphere. Drop in, so drop into the setting, talk about the general setting as a whole, like the trees, the mountains, whatever. Shift, this is where you typically introduce a character, and I know it's a description, so you're thinking like, why would you have a character in a description? But I like to use the character just to add to the description, to create more of a momentum and keep the description moving from one part to the next. And typically only one character, you only need one character with description. Zoom in, I'd zoom in on the character's emotions, and this is typically where I introduce a flashback. Zoom out, I zoom back out to the setting as a whole, and then leave, I go back to the weather. And because it's structured like, you know, weather, setting, character, setting, weather, it's automatically a circular narrative. With the story, the structure that I'd recommend you do is start with a pivotal moment, start with an interesting event. Because typically most students, they start with talking about the weather and stuff, right? But if you start with a pivotal event and a pivotal tense moment, it will make you stand out in the examiner's eyes. In the next paragraph, flash back to before that pivotal moment at the beginning of the day, and the rest of the response will be building up to that moment again until you have it at the end again. So you start with the moment and you end with the moment again. So that way you've automatically already included a flashback and a circular narrative. If you're including characters in your story, which I'm assuming you will be, avoid police report descriptions like the plague. Police report descriptions are saying things like, oh, Michael was wearing black jeans and he had eyes the color of the sky, or something. Yeah, you included a simile, but that description is meaningless. When you're doing description, try to have more significant descriptions. Significant character descriptions reveal far more about the character than, you know, police report descriptions. Avoid cliches like the plague as well. Don't say things like, she was the sunrise of a new day, she was the love of my life. Don't say things like that, please. You need to have interesting original similes, metaphors, and descriptive techniques. Show, don't tell. I'm pretty sure that speaks for itself. And also hysterical punctuation. Don't do hysterical punctuation. For example, using all caps or using a billion exclamation marks. That's just cringy, and it doesn't really show sophistication of writing. In terms of planning out the question 5, what I'd recommend you do is make these little checklists. So list out all the language features, all the structural features, all the punctuation, and put little tick boxes next to them, like physically draw them out in your exam paper. And as you're writing, you can come back to them and then just tick them off as you've included them, so you know what you've included and what you haven't, so you know what to include next. That ensures that you have a variety of stuff within your writing. Plan out a motif as well. I'd recommend having a motif within your question 5, and that can be anything like water, it can be a color, it doesn't have to be linked to the picture, just a random motif, and then have loads of things that link to the motif that you insert within your writing. For example, with water you have things like, you know, sustenance, waterfalls, oceans, lakes, drowning, tears. With snakes you have coiling, venom, poison, scales, hissing, shedding skin, things like that. And before we end the video today, I want to share an exciting opportunity. You can actually have last minute 90-minute exam boosters with qualified teachers for just £10. We have 2 for maths and 1 for English language, AQA. It's a really great way to boost your grade and maximize your marks before the exams. It's only £10. So if you're interested in that, all you have to do is go to the description of this video, click on the link that I left in there. It'll take you to a page where you just have to fill out a really quick form. It takes 30 seconds. And yeah, that's all my advice I have to offer. If you have any questions, you can leave them in the comments or you can email me. My email is in my channel bio. Good luck with your exams. You got this, and yeah, bye guys.